Hello, and welcome to the Cape Coffee Beans podcast. My name is Faden, and I'm the founder of Cape Coffee Beans, South Africa's leading retailer in the specialty coffee space. We sell everything you need to make an amazing cup of coffee at home, at the office, in the cafe, or even on the road, including equipment, accessories, and artisan roasted coffee beans, both online and in store at our headquarters in Claremont, Cape Town. This podcast is a deep dive into the world of South African specialty coffee with a focus on the brands, the businesses, and the people in the local coffee scene, many of whom I'm privileged to work with. I'll be bringing you interviews with many of these South African coffee heroes, so please do subscribe to the podcast and share it with your coffee loving friends. Thank you for your support. Now let's get to today's episode. Ladies and gentlemen, coffee lovers, we have a very special episode for you today. Today, on this episode, we are going to be talking about a special limited release coffee from Rosetta Roastery, which is a Hacienda La Esmeralda Geisha Natural. Now, you can go on and listen to the rest of the episode to find out more about that coffee, but first, a small disclaimer. This episode was recorded in the second week of February 2021. And it is about a coffee that is only available for a very limited time. So if you are listening near to that time, you may have the opportunity to try it. There's also a special in-cafe promotion mentioned towards the end of this podcast that if you're in Cape Town, you can take advantage of over the Valentine's Day weekend 2021. But of course, if you're listening to this later, unfortunately, you're probably not going to have the opportunity to try this coffee. However, I wouldn't click stop just yet because I do think that this episode, which is relatively short, is very interesting from the perspective of learning a little bit about this type of coffee, this type of variety, this estate that is very famous and has had a big impact on the coffee world. I think that reflecting on and talking about some of the top lots of coffee available in the world, and I would definitely say that this is one of them, is an interesting thing for any coffee lover to do, even if they can't necessarily taste that coffee. So if you can't, I do apologize, but I would encourage you to learn a little bit more. And this is something that I'm hoping to do more of with our special releases going forward. As always, I'd love to hear your feedback. You can email podcast@capecoffeebeans.co.za to let me know what you thought of this episode. Please do leave a review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you are listening at the right time frame and you'd like to try this coffee, get yourself to a Rosetta Cafe or visit the Cape Coffee Beans website and order a bag. It should still be available for a couple of weeks, and I can tell you that it's well worth a try. Now, on to the episode. Rob, welcome back to the Cape Coffee Beans podcast.
Thanks, Faden. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
No, my pleasure. You are our first second-time guest, I believe, which is an honor that I know that the topic we're going to talk about today is worthy of, because today we're talking specifically about a very special coffee that you guys have released recently. But before we get into the coffee, I thought we'd start by talking about the occasion that this coffee is helping to celebrate, which is that Rosetta is celebrating its 10th anniversary. How does it feel to have hit that milestone?
Yeah, it's well, we're actually almost 11 now. I guess we've taken too much time to to get our stuff organized, and last year, put us into a bit of a spin. It's kind of surreal, I guess. You know, on one hand, it's gone incredibly quickly, and on the other hand, it's felt like I've felt every day. So, I guess that's for most of us the kind of dichotomy. But yeah, I think you do a lot of reflecting at a time like this, and we do kind of a few like retrospective little social media posts and other things, and you kind of start scrolling through your archive of photos and journal entries and whatnot, and realize, yeah, a lot of water has gone under the bridge, and I've learned a huge amount on the way. But the one thing that hasn't changed is our passion for specialty coffee and exposing people to it. And it's still an industry that is very dynamic. There's so much happening. You can't get bored. There's always more to learn. So yeah, it's been a good journey.
Well, Cape Coffee Beans hasn't hit 10 years yet. It's a few years off, but I'm looking forward to finding out what that milestone feels like myself. So today we're talking about a Rosetta Reserve release, and maybe before we talk about the specific coffee, let's talk a little bit about Rosetta Reserves, because there have only been a handful of them over the years, right? How do you choose a Rosetta Reserve coffee?
Yeah, it's a good point, and maybe there has been a criticism of us maybe not having as many as we might have. But I think it's been important that every time we've picked one, it's ticked a couple of boxes. And obviously, the most important thing is that it's a sensory experience and it's something unusual, something that you're not going to get your hands on everywhere. And there's normally a little bit of a sacrifice in terms of, um, you know, the wallet, or you got to pay for it, because that's kind of what specialty coffee is about at the top level. So it's kind of showcasing kind of the potential that coffee has, and that it can't actually reach unless there's an extreme amount of commitment on behalf of all of the producers to really produce something outstanding. And that normally comes with a great story. And there's a lot of human involvement. There's generally various layers of commitment. It's not just an unusually good crop. It's a combination of a whole lot of factors that produce great flavor in coffee. So for us, I think we wanted something that not only was going to be a taste experience, but something that could open people's eyes, kind of pull back the curtain a little bit in terms of what happens in the process between the seed being planted and the cup being produced, so that there's an educative element in the process as well. And yeah, we wanted to pick coffees that are, can trigger an experience for people. Sometimes, for some people, just hearing about the price of a coffee is enough to make them pay attention. Um, for other people, the price is less of an issue, and it's the kind of the story or the sensory experience. So hopefully the reserves have done a little bit of all of those things. But yeah, we're definitely hoping to release more in the future, and maybe not once every 2 or 3 years, but maybe one or two a year, just because I think there's a growing market and appreciation for coffee at that level.
Yeah, I definitely think the local market for top end coffees is there. It's definitely small, but there are local consumers who really do want to taste the best of the best. And I will say, even though there have only been a
Yes.
handful of reserve coffees, I've certainly felt that they've been worth waiting for, and they all have been kind of in that top 1% or even fraction of a percent kind of coffees that you might taste around the world. And this one certainly would qualify. So this
Yeah.
Rosetta Reserve is a Hacienda La Esmeralda Geisha, naturally processed. So, could you tell the listeners a little bit about the estate this coffee comes from, and what's special about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think Hacienda La Esmeralda is a farm in Panama. It's actually owned by an American family. They've owned it for a few generations. I think the third generation now that's very much involved in the farm and the processing of the coffee are probably in their 40s, late 40s maybe. Um, and it's kind of the poster child in many senses for specialty coffee showcasing its true potential. And in about 2004, a coffee from this farm really caught the attention of some quite big names in specialty coffee. They realized they were onto something quite different and special. And a few important people phoned other important people, and the news spread, and people started bidding on this coffee. Panama has been quite progressive and had the best of Panama type competition, where various farmers or producers could submit lots, and they'd be judged by an international jury, and then bid on in that fashion. Kind of the early days of online auctions on the internet. And a long story short, this coffee ended up like smashing all records that have ever been paid for lots of green coffee by, I don't know, a factor of 10 or something. And I think the world news kind of you know picked up on the story, and I think it kind of opened people's eyes to, hey, there's coffee is not just this generic thing. There's actually a market for something that's extremely different to the kind of generic approach that we've had in terms of coffee pricing and rating. And I think that they've kind of opened a gateway to coffee's kind of price point spreading, really being driven by the quality of the product. Yeah, so that was in 2004. And I think the Peterson family have been incredible ambassadors for Panama and Panamanian coffee, but also for the potential of great coffee. I mean, and I found out um, over the time of doing a bit of research that they've actually been very open to send geisha seedlings or seeds all over the world. They haven't tried to hang on to them, and make it something exclusively available from them and their valley and a few neighboring farms and farmers. They've actually been incredibly generous, and so I think that investment back into the community of specialty coffee farmers and really working together with different people in different parts of the world and trying to see what can the C type produce, what can we achieve at the high ends of coffee has been a great story.
Absolutely, yeah. It really has an incredible heritage at Hacienda La Esmeralda. And you mentioned that this coffee is a geisha, and that for the benefit of any listeners who aren't familiar with the terminology, geisha is a variety of coffee. It sits one level below the taxonomy on the species, which is Arabica coffee that we all enjoy. And geisha is quite a special variety, right? I mean, it's not something you come across often in South Africa. What about it is it that you think makes it so prized?
And the interesting thing about the kind of geisha or geisha story is, I think there's the lineage itself is not completely clear, although we've got a pretty good idea of what happened. But as listeners may or may not know, coffees all originally came from Ethiopia or East Africa, and the same is true for coffee grown in Central America, and geisha's lineage comes from Africa, but through human selection of seed types that went to Costa Rica in the kind of 40s or 50s, and then from there to places like Panama. That kind of curation of limited stock and the kind of environment that it's grown in now at high altitude in Panama has produced something that's really unique and still a little different to the coffees from the birthplace in Ethiopia and Tanzania as well. So in terms of why special flavor profile wise, in the 1920s and 30s, it was prized for its resistance to disease and actually wasn't lauded for its cup quality, which is kind of ironic because now it's all about the cup quality. It's an incredibly aromatic coffee. It's straight away on the nose, whether it's in the grind or on the cupping table, the kind of explosive floral characteristics are obvious for everyone to pick up. It's light, it's delicate, it's balanced. There is body there as well. It's not overly acidic. Obviously, some of those factors are affected by processing as well. But I think some of those characteristics were probably things not lauded in coffee 100 years ago, when people would have noticed that, hey, this coffee has kind of less coffee and less body and less punch, but tastes and appreciation of what we want in the coffee have changed, luckily, since then a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say I've been lucky enough to taste a few geishas over the years from a few different parts of the world, and there's no question that it does have very distinctive character and recognizable traits regardless of where it's grown and even perhaps how it's processed, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, I think there seems to be a few magic kind of combinations of variables that produce get it to produce its best, but there's definitely just at a kind of varietal level, those kind of characteristics do definitely come through.
And this one is particularly special because I mean you guys actually have a history. You've ordered coffees from Hacienda La Esmeralda before, right? Is this the second or the third?
This is the third. I can't even remember the dates offhand. The first one was in 2011, and I think we did one in about 2015 or 2016 was the second one. This is the first time we've done a natural. I don't actually know offhand when they started doing natural coffees on the farm, and I remember thinking back and thinking, well, for them to do a natural does that make sense? Is it almost undermining the value of the coffee? For people that are familiar with natural coffees or not familiar, they do tend to have far more prominent kind of fruit notes. And occasionally, I think there's certain parts of the world that have used processing to kind of boost the potential of the coffee that in a washed form is maybe less exciting. And you think in a place that's producing such incredible wash coffees, does it make sense for them to kind of explore other processing where the kind of just beautiful potential of this coffee in its kind of purest form, which I don't mean that in a derogatory sense for other processing, but there's less impact from the fruit, and yet the characteristics are so standout. should they look at other processing methods? Is it just a trend thing? But I think this coffee has been processed beautifully. It's not they're not trying too hard to make the natural characteristics speak too loudly. I think finding a balance between the effective processing and without losing the characteristic of the coffee is what they were aiming for, and I think they've achieved that.
I would agree. I would agree. I have to say, when I heard it was going to be a natural geisha from Hacienda La Esmeralda, I did wonder, would those kind of floral and lighter characteristics that I've associated with coffees from that estate come through? And they do, but there's just this whole other dimension there as well. But of course, I suppose when you chose this coffee, were you nervous about ordering a natural? How did that decision making process go? How did you decide to order a natural lot rather than a washed lot?
Yeah, I think we just cupped a lot of samples from the farm. I bumped into Rachel Peterson, that is the daughter of probably the most well-known family members worked on the farm, and she's very involved. And I got chatting to her in Berlin and asked them, what have they been doing of late? Have they, are there any new initiatives? And she told me that they've been looking at kind of processing coffee slightly differently, for the last couple of years. And I think some of their most expensive auction coffee this year had, kind of anaerobic processing or elements of that as well in the processing. So I knew that they were producing good stuff across a range of processing methods. But we definitely got a lot of wash samples from them as well. And I guess for us, it was we want the customers to have an incredible experience. So what is going to be the coffee that makes them kind of open their eyes the most, and yet at the same time tell the story of the farm and its heritage of producing great wash coffees, or not undermine that. So yeah, I guess that was, we just let the cupping table kind of speak to us, and lots of rounds of blind cupping. And I think you try to eliminate your bias by drinking the cup and or cupping coffees alongside one another in various combinations, and trying to make sure that you're not there's no confirmation bias in our process. And I think we all agreed that this was the one that stood out to us the most.
Makes sense. Well, and it does present an incredibly unique tasting opportunity, right? Not only is it a Hacienda La Esmeralda from this incredibly famous estate, a geisha, the variety that made them famous in the first place, it's also one of the very early naturally processed ones. So it really is a very unique opportunity to taste something very special. So in closing, Rob, maybe you can just tell the listeners, how they can go about trying this coffee other than buying a bag from Cape Coffee Beans or buying a bag from the roastery.
Yeah. So we do actually sell the coffee by the cup in our cafe spaces. We've got our primary cafes in Bree Street in the CBD. We've got a coffee bar in the Silo District, as well as a kiosk in the egg department store, which is a new kind of department store revamp in Cavendish in the southern suburbs. So the bags are for sale at all those places, but we'll also, at least in the two town branches, make pour overs of the coffee, and we sell them per cup. So we've only done filter coffees up until now. It's 150 Rand a cup. You get a little booklet telling you the story, and a little bit more about the coffee as well. And I think it's a great way to enjoy it. Filter coffee, expertly prepared, gives you the ability to, over the course of maybe 20 minutes, enjoy and savor this incredible cup as it cools down and starts to reveal its different characteristics, and maybe in a way that's slightly less intense than an espresso-based drink, for example. However, we are doing a little event this weekend in Bree Street, just this Valentine's Day weekend, where we're going to be having the Esmeralda in the hoppers as well, so making espresso coffee. That'll just be, I think, on Saturday and Sunday, and we're going to discount the price a lot. I don't know offhand what it's going to be, but it won't be 150. It'll be a lot less than that. So if anyone's interested to have it dialed into an espresso machine, and if they want to drink it with milk as well, it's a standout kind of very floral, aromatic, flat white, or even latte if that's your thing. So yeah, if anyone's interested and doesn't want to pay for a full bag but wants to have a taste experience, that'll be a good time to do it.
Yeah, that sounds like a great way to try it if you're curious but not ready to commit to a bag. It also takes the pressure off your brewing technique to let the
Exactly,
Rosetta
exactly.
baristas do it for you. Though I have to say I did enjoy a bag at home, and it was wonderful and actually reasonably forgiving in the end when I brewed it as pour over at home. But I think I may be taking advantage of the Valentine's Day special and swing by Bree Street to try it as espresso because I didn't get to try it that way. Rob, thanks so much for your time, and thank you for bringing this incredible coffee into South Africa to share with everyone.
Thanks, Fed, and appreciate your support and getting the message out there very much.
My pleasure, and congrats on the 10 years as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Fed.
That brings us to the end of another episode of the Cape Coffee Beans podcast. I hope you enjoy that. I think Rob did a great job talking about some of what's interesting to know about this particular coffee, about Hacienda La Esmeralda, about Geisha. There was an interesting reflection on the history there. I think it should be educational whether you got to try the coffee or not. But if you are listening in February 2021 and now you're intrigued and you want to try it, I will make sure to include a link in the show notes to where to buy it at Cape Coffee Beans. And as Rob mentioned, you can also visit a Rosetta Cafe and try it by the cup, including a special discounted price during the Valentine's Day weekend. I think I'm going to be checking that out myself. Thank you very much for listening. Until next time, happy brewing.